Dan runs one of the most trusted newsletters in the media world, helping small publishers and media companies grow audiences and revenue through email. His homepage, built 3 years ago, still converting, but also quietly mispositioned. We dig into the subtle messaging tweaks that could push his already strong funnel even further, like calling out his actual target audience, fixing a misleading subhead, and adding the kind of social proof that actually converts. Let's get into it.
I'm Dan Oshinsky. I run Inbox Collective, where I work with newsrooms, nonprofits, and some independent writers to help them figure out how to use newsletters to get more readers and make money.
I love it. And you also have a killer newsletter all about newsletters, which is super meta. Can you tell us a little bit about how that newsletter came about and who kind of the audience of that newsletter is?
Yeah, I've been working on this newsletter, which doesn't really have a formal name. It's just the Inbox Collective newsletter since about 2019. And it started from a really simple place. At the time, I was working at the New Yorker, and I had a job working on newsletters there. I would regularly have coffee with folks who were getting newsletter jobs in the New York media space, and they would come to me and they'd ask me questions around, how do you do this job correctly? What do I need to know? What mistakes have you made so I don't make them again? Nobody goes to college for newsletters, so most people like me, they were a writer, an editor, they worked in audience development, and they were trying to figure out how to, I have this new job, how do I make it work for me? And they would always ask the same closing question, which is, hey, what should I read to get smarter about the newsletter space? And my newsletter came from a place of, oh, well, let me help these 15 other people in New York media who work in newsletter jobs. Let me help them figure out, share stuff that I'm learning, help them find stuff to read. Let me just do something for them. And when I launched the newsletter back in 2019, I really thought 10 or 15 people would sign up. I remember telling my wife if I got 10 people to sign up for it, I would do a second one. And 400 people signed up in the first 3 days. And it's like, oh, I guess there's a need here. I guess there's an interest. And so my audience has grown a lot from 15 people in New York media. Now there's more than 11,000 people on my list. And it's mostly people who are hands-on with newsletter strategy. A lot of people work at big media organizations, some at smaller nonprofits, a lot of independent folks who are on a platform like Beehive, Substack, Ghost, that sort of thing. And then there's also plenty of folks who, they have a funny job. Maybe they do something semi-related to newsletters, or they manage someone related to newsletters in their team. I've had people over the years, my favorites are the really weird ones. I remember a couple years ago, a whole bunch of people signed up for my newsletter, and they all worked at local banks all across the country. Turns out there was a conference, and someone had been asked, they're like, hey, I do a lot of like the marketing and email stuff for my bank. Like, is there a newsletter out there that I should sign up for to learn more about? And they're like, oh yeah, there's this guy, Dan, you should go, read his newsletter. So all these people who worked in communications for local banks signed up for my newsletter, and they all emailed me to say, like, we were at the local bank conference, whatever it is, and we all signed up. It's going to be great. And I was like, I'm happy you're here. I should tell you that I don't really know anything about banks and don't write about banks, but I hope you learned something, and I hope you can figure out how to apply these lessons to you too.
I love it. I love kind of the stories and the fact that you've grown it from something that you thought was just going to be 15 people to 11,000 plus is kind of incredible just by itself. And I know you also have a consultancy on the back of this,
Yep.
and I'm sure you also do like sponsorships and stuff like that. So how much of the overlap is there between the newsletter and also your consultancy?
The pretty strong overlap. The newsletter is the number one way I bring in new clients. Word of mouth from existing clients is number two. And I found that pretty much everything else out there, if I do an interview, a conversation like this, and I send people back to my newsletter, that's great because someone is probably unlikely to listen to this conversation and go, especially one where we're going to critique all the stuff that I'm doing on my website and go, this guy hasn't even figured out his website and I'm supposed to pay him to help us figure out our strategy. And no, like usually what happens is people, they see me give a talk or go on a podcast, they read something I wrote, then they sign up for my newsletter. They read me for a while. And the great thing is once they've been reading my newsletter, they get to learn how I think and what I care about in terms of building their strategy, monetization, growth, audience research, and then go, we like how you think, we'd love to work with you. So when they get on the actual call to learn more about the business, my success rate in terms of converting, potential client into client is really, really high because they've pretty much already decided by the time they get on the call with me that they want to work with me because they've been reading me for long enough. So for me, everything that I do is about funneling people onto my newsletter list, and there's pretty strong overlap, with the exception of, again, some of those edge cases where it's like, I don't anticipate going into the communication for bank space anytime soon. But I'm happy they're on my list, and I hope they keep reading.
Yeah, I love it. So like it really boils down to your main top of funnel is just get as many of these relevant people onto your list.
Yep. And
With
by the way, there's plenty of folks out there who do something related to newsletters that would not be a great fit for my audience. Like my people, they work in media, they work in publishing, maybe they're an independent writer, but like you are the people who are the best folks on my newsletter list are content focused with particularly an eye towards media publishing, that sort of thing. There's plenty of folks who have a newsletter that just would not be a great fit for my audience. And part of my job, and I think something we'll talk about in a few minutes, is how do I continue to evolve that message to really reinforce, hey, this is the newsletter for you? Because I actually think there's plenty of people who shouldn't be on my newsletter list. It wouldn't be all that useful for them.
I love it. And with that in mind, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and let's kind of walk through your homepage?
Let's do it. So I created this page. So when I first launched my newsletter, it was actually in the form of a Google Doc that I would send out once a month to my list. And at some point, I realized I really have to start doing some more formal publishing like real stories that you can read. And so the website came out of a place of I have to graduate to a real publishing platform. Google Docs is not good enough. And so I spun together a WordPress website. It has not changed too much in the last couple of years. I made some small changes, but mostly the messaging in the site has been pretty consistent over the past few years.
Yeah. First of all, I actually like your H1. It's super meta, but it makes sense for your goals. Get the newsletter for people who make newsletters. I do wonder if the first thing I'm kind of seeing in their subhead is every Wednesday we send you resources to help you grow your newsletter, engage your readers, and drive more revenue. Join 10,000 plus readers and learn how to build the right strategy for your newsletter. I wonder if you can make it even more specific so it's really targeted towards the media and the publishing space where you, and like maybe even nonprofits, which I know is your background in media and publishing, could you be a little bit more specific in that subhead and really kind of pull that in there and be like, yeah, well, all of the friends' weird stories, I want those people too. But the more specific you can be, the more likely you're just going to get way more interest. And then also, this is just a pet peeve of mine. Whenever I see like really big round numbers like 10,000, I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound like this is impressive, but it actually sounds even more real and specific if you say 11,100 subscribers. Something
Yeah.
like that, super really small, could actually go a really long way in just driving even more conversions.
One, I think it's a really good point about the specificity here. For me in particular, and something I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks is the people who I most like working with tend to be small teams. So I do work with larger publishers too, but I work with a lot of smaller publishers. These are teams that are usually anywhere between 3 and 15 people on staff. Their annual budget might be $250,000 up to like a few million bucks. So we're not talking about, New York Times types of organizations. We're talking about Boulder Reporting Lab in Boulder, Colorado, a 4-person, reporting kind of startup out there. Those sorts of teams tend to be a really good fit for the type of consulting that I do. And so something I've been thinking about, I agree, I still do like the big heading here because it's what I want, and it's my Inbox Collective is more than just email marketing. In fact, sometimes when I speak at email marketing conferences, I walk away and I'm like, I don't know if these are my people. Like these are folks who they're selling widgets via email, and that's fine. But my thing is more around, are you creating engaging content sent out on a regular cadence, often personality driven or written by a human to try to engage a specific audience? And then you might layer on the marketing strategy or the sales strategy on top of that, like I do. So I still like the big heading here, but I have an agreement that the specificity, like talking around like publisher, nonprofit, independent operator, small teams, like that's not here and that should be. Something else that actually a client of mine pointed out the other day to me that I loved. They were like, why do you lead with the word every Wednesday? That's not the most important thing. Like, you should mention it because people should know when it goes out, but that shouldn't be the first thing. It's like, you're right. And I was really happy because I had been telling them similar things about their page. And I love they brought it back to me and they're like, you're not even following your own advice, Dan, which is, by the way, Jessica, you know this, the most common thing among people who do like consult. What happens is, for anyone who does the work like you or I do, I have a page and this works. The conversion rate is really good on this page. 50% of people who come to this page end up, actually, that's not true. On the main newsletter, I'm going to jump and bend my statement. On the main newsletter page, the Get Our Newsletter page, which is literally just a newsletter sign up, 50% of people who come to this page sign up. This one, I got to double check the number. It's lower than that because people are also looking for other things. They're looking for stories. But it converts really well because it's simple, it's uncomplicated. And so what happens is you make a thing and then you're off busy doing the stuff that involves helping other people make money and build their business. And so this sort of thing on your website tends to fall by the wayside. But yeah, I think the specificity in terms of audience is great. And I do like the idea of the specificity in terms of the readership. The challenge there is making sure if I do go to a number, 11,200 people, making sure I'm regularly updating the number to match what's going on because I'm the kind of person who I clean up my list every so often. And so the list goes to 12,000 and then it goes back to 10,700 and then it goes up a little bit and then it goes down. So the specificity there is an important piece as well. And making sure I'm updating it because otherwise you're like, I'm promoting it as an 11,000 person list, but actually it's 13. Oh no, wait, it's back to 12. Yeah. Any
Yeah.
thought? Do you have any suggestions there?
I would say in general, I mean, that's definitely a valid thing. Like cleaning your list does help. I would just say, like in general, as long as it's within 1,000 or two at that range, it's probably not a big deal. Like nobody expects you to be changing it dynamically every single day or, even every single month. Maybe, set a reminder every 3 months to be like, oh, let's make sure that this number is accurate.
Yeah.
But that sensitivity is a huge point, and something you said before, which is, I kind of cringe at this because I think the exact same thing is, it's kind of wrong when a client has to point or a prospect has to point out to you something that is like contradictory to what you already know, but like we're blind to it, troubleshoots problems. It's so much easier to do the work for other people than it is to kind of look at our own stuff.
Hmm?
So to that point about like, every Wednesday, that could still be in there, but don't lead with it. And then also
It's further down,
specific.
yes.
Go on.
It's further down it's a little further down the page. It's a thing that's important. I do want to tell people when they're going to get it so they can set the expectations.
Yeah.
But if I'm giving the elevator pitch to somebody in person, they're like, what do you write your newsletter about? I wouldn't lead off by saying, well, every Wednesday. I would lead off by saying, I write a newsletter to help people who work in the newsletter space. Here's what you get in the inbox. Comes once a week on Wednesdays. It would be the last thing on the list. It certainly wouldn't be my lead-off sentence.
I mean, that what you just said there, a variation of that would be killer for
Mhm.
right below get the newsletter for people who like make newsletters. And just something you said before, which is I'm really good at working with small newsletter teams and small publications. The one thing that immediately stands out to me is I don't see any social proof above the fold.
It's
So
literally the next
I'm
thing I was
going
going
to
to ask you about.
assume you have probably dozens, if not hundreds, of people saying how much they love your newsletter.
Mhm.
Can you take 3 of them, or can you even just take logos from some of the places that you've worked with, or some people who subscribed, and just put a little row of logos right in that hero section, or have two or have three killer testimonials from the types of people who you help will just instantly take something that's already converting at an insanely high rates at 30 to 50%, and you're probably going to convert another 10% just because they now see themselves in it.
So I've been thinking about doing this a couple different ways. One is with testimonials, and that makes a lot of sense. For me, one of the holdups has always been, well, I have to go ahead and get the testimonials from the biggest organizations because, like, what people really want is a testimonial from the person who runs newsletters for the Washington Post. They want that person. They want the testimonial from the person who runs newsletters at The Economist. These people are my readers already. And I could, but if I want to go down the rabbit hole of trying to reinforce the small teams kind of thing, and I'm reinforcing, and my holdup is always, you go to certain pages, like let's see if I actually got the URL right here. Yes. Okay. The strategy breakdowns. Great newsletter. I love the tagline. I love the sample of the product, what you get. Join 80,000 strategy nerds from Google, Meta, Atlassian, Stripe, Snap. My issue has always been, oh, you just have to brag about the biggest organizations, don't you? But the flip side of it is I could always do it where I say, well, if I'm reinforcing that small teams are the people that I work with, well, I don't want a testimonial then from The Economist. No offense to the great folks, The Economist. If Aaron at The Economist is listening to this by chance, he's a lovely guy. Aaron, keep doing great work. Big fan of yours. And I know they read the newsletter and all that stuff. But for me, it might mean, well, the right person who I should be getting a testimonial from is, Keith Pepper, who works for, who runs the team at Rough Draft Atlanta, like small organization, big goals. Keith has been a long-time client. Like, that would be a great testimonial to have that reinforces the, like, small teams tend to like me kind of thing. But the question for you is, like, would you rather have, because there's different ways I could do it. I could do testimonials, or I could go and do the kind of thing using a tool like Senja, for instance, to just have, like, some of the faces, rated 5 stars by over 3,000 newsletter nerds or whatever you want it to do. Do you have a preference? Do you care whether it's a testimonial or whether it's like a star rating with some faces or just the brand names? Like, do you have a preference, or do you think any social proof is a win here?
There's so much to unpack there. One was literally just hanging out with Ollie at Senja a couple weeks ago. Great product. Highly recommend that product. I think you can definitely use a product like that, but I don't think it's a replacement for also having testimonials. And I feel like one of the biggest myths that I see, and with a lot of the work I do with clients as well, is every client is always like, hey, I want the biggest names, the biggest logos, but 9 times out of 10, unless you are literally going up market and you are going enterprise, those big logos actually can even hurt your conversion rate because they just suddenly think, oh, I'm too premium or you're too expensive for the little guys. So I'd almost say challenge the opposite of what you have said and literally just go after and find who are the 3 to 4, I'd say 3 because rule of 3 or 3 or 6. Who are those 3 to 6 people that are your exact ICP, and get those people or someone similar to them to be your testimonials as opposed to the big logos. You can still have the big logos on your site, but that's not actually what's going to convert into your consultancy and probably won't even, and some of those people will still join your newsletter. But yeah, if you have Senta in there where it says, hey, 11,000 subscribers and or, a 5-star rating, a 4.9 rating, and then you also have 6 testimonials from your dream fit clients, that's way more powerful.
I think that's very fair. I think for me, it's a thing that I've absolutely collected over the years. Again, a lot of this came from a place a few years ago of building out a site that was functional and that did what I needed it to do, which is it gets people onto my email list, it showcases my stories. It's not the fanciest or best website that has ever been created. There are changes that I plan to make to the website to make it easier to find the stuff, in particular the content that you want, because right now, like, you can go to that search button and our search feature has gotten a lot better in terms of finding things, but it definitely isn't the kind of site right now where like if you come to us looking for a specific thing, you pretty much have to use search to find it. Otherwise, you would be clicking through for a long, long time because the rest of the site is set up as an old school kind of blog. And I have multiple years worth of content, and there's a lot to dive into, and I haven't done a good enough job of organizing it. But this also is a good starting place for there was a reason this is the first thing you see on my website. I want you to come, and if you're not on the newsletter list, I want you to sign up for the newsletter, and I'm in agreement with you. I think the testimonials are an easy kind of win. I think I would go with something like 3, and I like the idea of testimonials as opposed to logos. I don't want to add too many elements because part of the reason this page converts, and my newsletter page does as well, is because there's not too much other stuff that you can do here. Like you can sign up for my newsletter, or you do have a few options at the top of the page, but all of those are good options. Like either like if you don't sign up for my newsletter, you're reading more stories, going to a newsletter sign up page, or clicking on the like work with us page to go figure out how you can pay me money. So those are all good additional outcomes, but there's not additional stuff that I've cluttered the page with because I really want you to sign up for the newsletter first and foremost.
Yeah. You just pretty much nailed what I always say across a lot of these teardowns. And then also when working with clients is you really want to get simple about, okay, what is a desired CTA? In your case, desired one, get them on the newsletter. Secondary CTA, work with Dan, and hire Dan. So my other point to you would be, I like the fact that your navigation menu is small. It doesn't have the Chinese buffet of links that you see on a lot of other websites. It's homepage, it's rated stories, work with us. I'd almost argue get our newsletter is repetitive, how it's rated right now. Could you maybe just change that to a CTA button? So instead of it being in your navigation menu, just have it be in the right-hand side, the same yellow button that says sign up for a newsletter, and you have that in 2 different places. That's gonna instantly convert even better. And then I'd also just challenge, why do you have more? I think that's actually a menu. Get rid of that little caret icon right before the search.
Yeah, so part of this comes from these are good points. Part of this just comes from how the WordPress template was set up and what it looks like first and foremost on mobile. Because on mobile, everything is like go and make this smaller, everything smushes down.
Yeah.
So then the little the hamburger menu is what I've always called it, but the 3 dots there become super important for those mobile users. I do think it's something that with a future version of the website, and by the way, like I remember when I built this website, I took a week off of work. I went to the beach.
Mhm.
I was like, my goal for the week is to hang out a little bit and build a darn website. I'm not going home until I have a functioning website. And so went to the beach every day for like an hour or two, came back and went into WordPress and set up a dang website. And that was my goal. It's based on a pretty simple out of the box WordPress template. It is not fancy. I have yet to pay like a WordPress developer or someone who actually spends real time in WordPress to make this better, which is a thing that I can and will do down the road because this is not the best version of this website. Now, I'm in agreement with you that like I think for me, one on the homepage, I would not show get our newsletter. Now, I do think when we get down to a story specific page,
Yeah.
it's worth doing there. Although this is also a case where, the navigation doesn't follow you down the page. And these articles are long. That's another thing that I don't love about this version of the website. That like as you scroll down the page on an article, the most important CTA for me, which is get our newsletter, doesn't follow along with you. And I could do that through the navigation at the top. I could do it via some sort of right rail, or some sort of right rail unit that follows along as you go down the page. Either way, this is part of the long-term Inbox Collective 2.0 strategy of hire someone to actually help me build out the better version and the next version of this site because the site's fine. The site is fine. It functions. It does the thing that I want it to do, but it's certainly not a version where I go, No room for improvement here. We've done it. We built the best version. We built the best version of a website.
Totally. And something you can even just mention over here. And I know going back to testimonials, adding in the testimonials or adding in the testimonials is like an image right in that hero section or right below it could go a long way. If you scroll down on the page,
Yeah.
so new to Inbox Collective, start here. I like that. You kind of have some of your, I'm guessing some of your best stories right here. I would maybe, add when you scroll down a little bit more. Once you're done with some of those stories, maybe you'll need to do 4 or 5 of them. Have another CTA button that just says, hey, subscribe to the newsletter, sign up for a newsletter. Keeping the CTA consistent could just be another way to just further reinforce, hey, this is our primary CTA. This is what I want everyone to do. Is this a very simple way?
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, something that I want to do long term with the site, because this is, again, this is fine. For me, people tend to come to Inbox Collective for a few reasons. One is they're brand new because they saw me speak at a conference or on a podcast or a friend recommended it. So they're brand new. That's great. There's also the repeat users who are often coming to look for a very specific thing. They're looking for best practices. They're looking for case studies. My boss said that I don't know if we should really implement a welcome series or we should do this bit of audience research. Is it really worth it? So they're coming to my site saying, did Dan write an article about this that I can grab and go, oh, here's this case study that the Financial Times wrote about how they use surveys to reinvent their newsletter strategy. I'm going to send it to my boss. It's going to make me look smart, and then we're going to get to do the thing that I want to do. So for me, part of the goal with this part of the website going forward is to better organize things. So when people are looking for specific stuff, and I haven't decided whether it's going to be based on categories like monetization, growth, content, whether it's going to utilize certain terminology, whether I want to try to funnel people in based on their level of experience, like just getting started with newsletters versus you've had a newsletter for a while, or based on the category of person, like independent person, click here to get resources. Working as part of a large publication, click here. Like there's lots of different ways that I could organize it, but right now what I know is like this is what I could make work with the starting version of the website myself, which is just kind of like an old school blog roll. Like, here's the most recent stuff I publish on the website. Start here. But it certainly does not, I think as I've gone further and further down the road with Inbox Collective, a couple years worth of content, hundreds of articles, it does not reflect the depth of content that we have on the website or make it easy for you to find the things that you're actually looking for. So this is one of those areas when I think about the next version of the website that I just go, this is such a bit, I think the optimization at the start in terms of driving newsletter signups is absolutely there. But this is the next piece of if you're coming to the website looking for a thing, your best option, frankly, right now is to ignore all of that and just go directly to the search feature.
Yeah, and that's obviously problematic for optimization sort of thing. I would say there's a lot of ways you can tackle this. One really simple thing you can start out with, and there's a lot more you can do. A very simple thing would be to use a tool like Write Message, which Write Message lets you literally, plug into your site and lets you to be able to funnel it. So like, are you a beginner? Are you intermediate? Are you advanced? Do you work for a small team? Do you work for a large team? And you can then give them the content that they want based solely off of what they're opting into directly on your homepage. That could be a really interesting 2.0 optimization so that you're not relying on people to have to search. Another thing you could do, depending on how tech savvy you want to be and your view on this, but I've seen a lot of brands do this, and I'm actually doing this for my own podcast, is create a custom GPT. You have 6 freaking years of newsletter editions. If you create your own custom GPT of all of your content, and then you put it in there as an Ask Dan chatbot, and there's even tools that will do this for you, but it's also not that hard to do it yourself with the knowledge that I know you already have. And you can therefore give people basically choose their own adventure based off of only your content.
I think it's a great idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. For me, It's just about trying to figure out the different paths
Mhm.
and what are people looking for when they come to the website? Is it knowledge? Is it, I mean, a big thing that I'm putting an emphasis on more in the next year is tools related to newsletters, helping people find the right sorts of tools. There's a nice affiliate business associated with the site, and so that's one thing that people are looking for. In the future, if there's any paid products or anything like that, there's lots of, to go back to your primary and secondary CTAs, there's potentially lots of competing interests going forward. And so
Mhm.
some of this with the website and the homepage in particular is how do I make sure that there's the right prioritization here to funnel people towards the initial steps? I like the idea of a GPT. I've played around with Right Message before and like it. I think some of that stuff could also be replicated via something simple like a
Mhm.
survey tool on the website using something like a type form. Answer a couple questions, and then we spit out the next thing that you should do based on the answers that you gave us. That could be possible as well. It's just a matter of how much do I want to complicate things. And of course, like a right message tool is great. Also, not the cheapest thing in the world.
Mhm.
So like what I found when I've used it in the past is that I didn't get the most out of the platform. So I stopped using it because you know what? I would love to be able to use this to its fullest, but spending a few $1,000s a year on a platform that I'm getting 5% of the value from is not a great investment right now. So there's also that factor. Long term, can I get the most out of it? Is this a primary thing that I'm going to use a lot?
Yeah, totally. There's so many different ways you can go, whether it's a custom GPT, using Right Message, using a type form. The main kind of goal is thinking through, okay, what is that prioritization and how do I help subscribers get what they're looking for and also funnel more of those people either into signing up for the newsletter
Mm-hmm.
or working with your company, with your consultancy. My other kind of question I had for you is when is the last time you did a survey to your newsletter audience?
Oh, I do big surveys at least once a year to my audience. The other thing, though, is I, because of my, well, there's two pieces. One is in my newsletter, whenever anyone signs up, I ask questions and ask them to reply. So I get a lot of direct feedback on a daily basis. And two is I have a lot of conversations about the newsletter space with others.
I love it.
Uh, so one is I get a lot of feedback directly to my newsletter, and two, I have a lot of conversations on a daily basis with folks. So I'm always asking questions of folks, sneaking little things in at the end. Hey, what do you think about this? Tell me a little bit more about X, Y, and Z. And so I'm always kind of slowly collecting little bits of information too. But I did the last big survey of my audience last year. The plan is to do another one in, I think, probably early fall, because there's a few new things that I've been working on that I want some feedback on.
Yeah. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I have a couple of notes.
Please.
Okay, so you just said probably the most interesting thing that I've heard you say yet, which is, oh, I'm talking to all my readers every single day. They're giving me responses when they sign up. I have these surveys. Have why is some of that stuff not? I'm sure maybe it is, but like, why is that not categorized in Google Docs or Notion, a Google spreadsheet or Notion or Airtable, and then funnel in the top categories of that so it's automatically on your homepage and updating it more regularly.
Oh, so it actually does exist in a series of Google Sheets that I have
Mhm.
in terms of one, categorization for different sorts of how I categorize things behind the scenes for different sorts of content that works for Inbox Collective. In terms of the website, the challenge is, so I worked with a writer when I was first launching the website. Now she works over at Hearst. Her name is Alex Hazlett. She's brilliant, so smart, loved working with her. And something that Alex said that stuck with me for a long time is she described what we were building at Inbox Collective as creating these, and she called them newsletter planets, which is imagine a category like audience research. Audience research is a topic that is super important to the newsletter world. Love that you asked about this for mine. Something that I recommend to all of my clients. Make sure that you are regularly gathering information from your audience. The more you learn about what your audience needs, the better you can build a product for them. So for us, I've written articles about how to use polls, how to use surveys, tools that you can use for these. There's some case studies from different organizations as to how they use, surveys and research. what all this creates is these kind of these planets where like the main category is the planet, audience research, and then there's little bits, little like moons and things orbiting it. So it's audience research is the planet, but then like tools is related to it. Best practices is related to it. Case studies is related to it. All right, there's a little bit of all of that for each of these sorts of categories. For me, then, that's one way that I could absolutely organize some of the site around the planets and go, all right, what are the core things? Growth, content, audience development, monetization. That would be a really logical way to, deliverability would be another one, would be a logical way to get people in. It's just a matter of, as I continue to build out the site, trying to figure out how do I want to categorize, how do I want to tag, how do I want to structure things so it's scalable going forward. Right now, it's pretty basic. Like I have lots of tags. WordPress lets you add 1 million of these. I have some basic categories, but I haven't done a good enough job, and I think it's a fair point of trying to organize it the way that it could be organized. But yeah, to your point, like I love getting the reader feedback because then what happens is it inspires content. If I hear from 10 people, they like, what are you struggling with? They say, this is what I'm struggling with. That's an article, that's a post, that's a guide, that's a piece of research I'll need to do. But it's not reflected as clearly as it could be on the site. I think it's a fair point.
Yeah, totally. I think you just basically answered your own question there, which is, I don't think those 5 articles you have there are interesting, but I don't actually think they're probably helping you as much as the fact that you have these massive kind of categories and or planets. That's the stuff that probably should be where your 5 articles are on your homepage today. Where it's like, hey, it's either for categories, you said audience research, deliverability, and I think 2 others as well. Have those ones be within that section. And then something else I would just say to round out your homepage is adding a little more about yourself. So it's like you're the founder of this. If you have like any sort of writers or editors as well, maybe put them on like a meet the team sort of page, sort of thing. But like, give a little bit more about who you are on that page. And then also have those categories be a little bit more, because that's what people are asking.
We do actually have an about the team page because there are writers and contributors who contribute on a regular basis. It's just hidden in that hamburger menu right now. In terms of prioritization, that was one choice I made pretty early on, that of the things that were on the site, it was important to have, but not important to feature. Another thing that's in there too is there's an affiliate policy in terms of like what we recommend and why, and a list of all the affiliates we're recommending. Because anytime I'm linking to stuff within the website, I want there to be a clearly labeled policy that's like, here's what we get paid for and what we're recommending and why we like it. That's one more thing that I want on the website, but I didn't want necessarily to be like in the top menu the first thing that you saw, because you have to make cuts somewhere. And getting people to content, getting people to my newsletter, getting people to learn about how they can work with me, those were 3 things that were more important.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we unpacked here. Is there anything else before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate the feedback here. I also think the cobbler shoes thing is so true. This is one of those cases where anyone who works in this space, it's so helpful to have outside perspective to come in and say like, why do you do this? Because I do this all day with my clients, but frankly, I don't spend as much time as I could or should doing it internally, simply because like I'm busy with the other things that pay the bills. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of fear of navel gazing, like how much time do you really want to spend thinking about yourself? But I do think this is really valuable. So I so appreciate the feedback, and there's a few things here that I'm definitely going to be able to borrow to improve the website going forward.
Yeah, I love it.